Gravy with Big Gravy Barbecue here. Today I'm going to be taking you through the rundown of how I like to prepare my Packer-style brisket. First of all, you might be asking, what's a Packer-style brisket? In a nutshell, this is it. You got two pieces. The main piece being the flat. It's the large, flatter piece of meat on this brisket, also known as a lean cut in most of your barbecue joints. Now the other part of this brisket is right here at the point, also known as the point, and it's a moister, fattier cut, or at most barbecue joints referred to as the moist cut. My personal favorite. Alright, now I flipped this brisket over in order to show you all the underside. This is where all the fat on this brisket is going to be located at, and I'm going to walk you through some steps I like to use in preparing this. Now if you gently feel along this brisket, you're going to feel some harder parts and some softer parts of this fat. The harder part's probably going to be the thicker part of this brisket, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to gently shave off layers of this brisket a little at a time. Now as you do this, you're going to notice some of this fat's a little hard to get through. What you're going to want to do is you're going to continue doing this, taking off little layers of this until you get this down to about 1/4 inch of thickness. Now this is important so you can ensure even cooking all the way through, and the bottom side is where you want to pay all of your attention to removing the fat. Okay, we've got this brisket completely trimmed now the way I want it. Now let me tell you before we get started, one of the more important things about trimming a brisket, which I forgot to mention earlier, you want to make sure you have a sharp knife, and you want to make sure you have a good sharpener to keep it sharp, because it's going to get dog cutting through this fat. It's not necessarily an easy chore. That's why if you don't feel comfortable, go ahead and go out and buy yourself a super trim brisket. It's going to save all this headache, but you're going to pay the money for that ease. Now, if you notice here, we got about 2 pounds of fat off this brisket. And it can vary anywhere from 1, 2, 3 pounds of fat depending on how fat that brisket was to start with. And if you look along this edge, you're going to see I got about 1/4 inch fat, and it's pretty much 1/4 inch from side to side on this brisket, and you can tell by feeling it, it's a lot softer, not near as firm as it was earlier. I also took the time to cut a little bit of fat out between the point and the flat itself. That's going to help with the cooking of the whole brisket, and it's going to really make it all cook about the same temperature evenly all the way across the board. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the seasoning part of this brisket. So we're on to the seasoning portion of this process. You're going to notice I've layered some plastic wrap underneath this brisket. That's in order to be able to keep the area a little bit cleaner, plus it'll play into this a little bit later. Now the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take some yellow mustard, and if you don't like yellow mustard, olive oil works fine. You're going to put a thin layer over this whole brisket. You don't want to put too much, because too much is going to make that seasoning clump up, and it's going to make a big old mess on your hands, and it's not going to stick to the brisket too well either. And don't worry about that flavor of mustard. You're not going to be able to tell it's on there by the time the smoking process is finished. Alright, we've got a pretty good even layer across this whole thing, and I'll make sure you get the edges. Now we're ready to apply the rub. Now, seasoning is also referred to as a rub. Now I use my own personal seasoning. That's Big Gravy's Bitchin' Brisket Rub. Now I'm not going to give you these ingredients. These are mine. Any basic brisket rub will work fine. Any salt and pepper based rub's good. Stay away from those sugar rubs, because sugar has no place on beef. You save that for the pork and poultry. Now I'm going to put a pretty liberal layer of rub on this brisket, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to rub this in. You want to make sure you get it into all the nooks and crannies and crevices as much as possible. And don't be afraid to really layer it on. I'm going to go ahead and finish up this rub, and when we get back, we'll cover the wrapping part of this brisket. Alright, so we've got this brisket rubbed up and rubbed down. This thing's got to rub on every inch possible. This right here is the fatty side. I want you to take this into advice. When you rub that first side and you flip it over, make sure you got enough rub the first time, because we don't want to keep flipping this thing over and over again. We're going to lose more rub every time. Now we're going to move on to the wrapping process. This is why this right here was important, because you're going to be able to save all this loose seasoning that's on the sides here and rub, and you're going to keep it from falling off and not being used. Now you're going to take it and you're going to pull it up real tight, about as tight as you can get it, in order to be able to keep a nice tight seal on this brisket. And this is just the first layer. We're just beginning the brisket cocoon. Alright, see how I've kind of got these edges tucked in now? Now we're going to go over to our plastic wrap container, and we're going to pull a layer of plastic wrap over just like this. Now we're going to flip it, keeping it tight. We're going to flip it again. Now I know you're saying these edges right here are coming loose, but watch this. We're going to flip it over here. We're going to use this plastic wrap like it's free, basically. Because the most important part is ensuring that you're getting a good tight seal on this brisket for the purpose of this rub, because you want it to marinate in its own juices and in the spices that I got on here right now. I'll tell you what, you get through wrapping this baby up, and you're not going to have a leak in the refrigerator, but we're going to put it on a cookie sheet just in case. Alright, almost done. One more little flip here, and just like that, that's a wrap for this brisket. Now we're going to take a cookie sheet, put it right here, nestle it down, and it's going to sit in the refrigerator just like this for about 12 hours. Then in the smoker tomorrow.